outside Dunfermline Abbey. Inside the Abbey, Robert the Bruce is actually buried in there. Bless the man in cloth of gold. This is a man that regained Scotland's independence when he led the Scottish Army at the Battle of Bannockburn on the 23rd of June, 1314. By his side, he had his right-hand man, James Douglas, the Black Douglas, also known as the Good Sir James in Scotland. Had with him also Thomas Randolph, another famous Scottish patriot. Also, he had, as well as he had his brother Edward Bruce, and lots of other Scottish patriots who stood on the field of Bannockburn and won our independence. When Robert the Bruce died on the 29th of June, 1329, there were 20,000 people lining the streets. Such was the respect for this man who won back our independence. His body was buried in a cloth of gold here in Dunfermline Abbey. His heart was removed from his body and placed in a silver casket, and it was carried by his faithful friend and right-hand man, the Black Douglas, with a mission to take his heart to the Holy Land and lay it in the Holy Sepulchre, the tomb of Jesus Christ. And when we get down to Melrose, where the Bruce's heart is interred under the high altar at Melrose Abbey, I'll tell you the story of how the Bruce's heart came to be in that area. But here we are outside Dunfermline Abbey. It's quite an impressive building, and if you look up at the top there, it says Bruce King. A really impressive building this is, and this is where our greatest hero in many people's eyes is buried, in Dunfermline Abbey. I'm going to let Glenn have a few words now about the Bruces.
Good afternoon, Fescar Ma. I'm a... Oops. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Well, basically, he's also buried in there beside his wife. She was buried there with him, but he was also married before that. He actually had two wives. His first wife was called Isabella of Mar, and she was born around 1277, and she died in 1296. And she was the first wife and grandmother of Robert II of the Scots, who was the founder of the House of Stuart. She was a daughter of Dole II and Ellen of Wales, who was an illegitimate daughter of Llewellyn ab Lornworth the Great, who was also the first Prince of Wales, the proper Prince of Wales. But she had previously been the wife of Mulhulun II, who was the Earl of Fife, who was probably from around here somewhere, as we're in the Kingdom of Fife just now. Her father, Dole II, was one of the 7 guardians of Scotland. I'm not quite sure what happened to their marriage, whether he died, or I presume that must have happened, because she married Robert when she was 18, and legend tells us they were very much in love. And she became pregnant not long after they were married, and she sadly and tragically died, giving birth to their daughter Marjorie in 1296, and she is buried in Paisley. His second wife was Elizabeth De Burgh, and he married her 6 years later, and she was born around 1284, and she died in 1327 on the 27th of October, so it's only a few days on from her the anniversary of her death. She was the daughter of one of the most powerful Irish nobles, a guy called Richard Og de Burgh. Og in Gaelic means young, so presumably there must have been a Richard who was it's like maybe like number 2, but they're saying Og as in he was a younger version. And he was the second Earl of Ulster. He was also a very close friend of Edward I of England. And records of Elizabeth are very scarce, but her mother was Margarita de Burgh, and they married in 1302 at Writtle near Chelmsford. It's thought that Robert actually met Elizabeth somewhere around the courts in England. And she was 18 and he was 28 at the time. And on the 27th of March 1306, they were crowned King and Queen of Scots at Scone, in defiance of the English claims of suzerainty over Scotland after the execution of William Wallace She was captured in Rossshire in June 1306 when Bruce was defeated at the Battle of Methven, which was one of the many battles that Bruce was involved in to try to regain Scotland's freedom. And she was imprisoned for 8 years by the English from October 1306 to November 1314 after the Battle of Bannockburn, and she was one of the other people who were taken to Carlisle and became part of a prisoner exchange. And she'd been moved to 6 locations during that time, including Windsor Castle, to avoid being rescued, which there were many attempts to rescue the Bruce's women. His sisters and his daughter were also imprisoned in various places. His sisters had the worst deal. One was held outside Roxburgh Castle in a cage, a wooden cage, for that entire period of time. And his other sister was outside Berwick Castle, being hung in a cage in all weathers. I have no idea how they survived, but they seem to have survived. And now together they had 3 children who reached adulthood: Matilda, Margaret and David. David was future David II of the Scots. Sadly, she died on 27th of October 1327 at the royal residence at Coolin in Banff. And she was around 43 years of age, but as I say, the records are quite scarce. And she's buried here at Dunfermline. The kings and queens were buried here in Dunfermline since 1093. And after that, they were they were sent over to Iona. They were taken in ships that started out at Porton Cross in Ayrshire, and they went to various locations so that every single person who lived in Scotland, at least on the west coast, could pay homage to their king and queen when they died. But the Bruces were buried here. He actually died 18 months later. Her coffin was rediscovered in 1917 because what happened is this was ransacked during the Reformation, this castle, and maybe you want to tell a wee bit more about the Reformation?
Well, all we know is that during the Reformation, a lot of buildings were destroyed. I reckon they actually went in and they actually, I think they partially destroyed the tomb of Robert the Bruce. Recently, we were in Stirling. We saw the sculptured head of Robert the Bruce, and Gwen actually pointed out the fact that the 2 front teeth were missing. She says it's probably because he was in a lot of battles. But another explanation could be that it was damaged during the Reformation when the tomb was actually partially destroyed. That is another possibility, although I don't rule out Gwen's suggestion he may have had his teeth knocked in during many of the battles he involved in. But there we go. But this is a fantastic building. See if we actually pan around here and see this. It's a fantastic building, this, and to think that it's survived all these years, when you think of some of these modern buildings that are up and down in 20 years, it's fantastic that these people could build such fantastic structures away back in that time period. We're going to be moving on down to Melrose about 1 o'clock, quarter to 1. So in about 15 minutes we're going to start en route down to Melrose, and this is where the Bruce's heart is buried under the high altar at Melrose. We've been at many locations to do with Bruce today, and it's fantastic to think the influence that he had in Scotland. I only wish that every Scot could open their eyes. Just as the bell goes there. Wish that every Scot could open their eyes to Scotland's history and learn about people like Robert the Bruce. The effort he put in to free our country, it must be recognised. And as I mentioned earlier, isn't it fantastic that 20,000 people lined the route when this man was buried? Such respect they had for him. And you know, it really breaks my heart when you see these people that moan, oh, Robert the Bruce, he was a traitor, and they give all this nonsense that they believe that the Brit press give out and all the unionist people give out about Robert the Bruce. He was one of our greatest heroes. To me personally, he was our greatest hero, and I'll always champion the cause of Robert the Bruce. And we're going to move on soon to Melrose Abbey to remember Robert the Bruce. Thank you very much.
I believe that's the new Fourth Road Bridge that we're seeing in the distance here.